The sun hasn't fully cleared the tree line yet. It's a little after 6, and out here in the red clay country of North Georgia, the fog is still lying thick in the hollows. Off in the mist, there's a leaning locust post. Hank Mullins' grandfather hammered it into this ground in 1937, and it's still holding. Hank is looking out at a hillside. 18 months ago, you couldn't see the hillside at all. There was a curtain of green in the way, 30 feet of it, the kind of green curtain that lines half the back roads between Atlanta and Montgomery. Today, the curtain is gone, and where it used to hang, a couple hundred goats are strung out across the slope, chewing, stepping, chewing again. Hank doesn't say much for a while. When he does, it comes out slow, like a fact he's still getting used to. My granddaddy planted that stuff, and the government cut him a check to do it, $8 an acre. He's got company. All over the South, Alabama, Mississippi, the Carolinas, other farmers are telling the same story and watching the same green walls disappear. Not because of a new chemical, not because of a machine, not because of 60 more years of Washington money. 3 living things brought it down, and not one of them ever sent a bill. Act 1. The vine the government paid for. To make sense of how a man got paid to plant a weed his grandson now hires goats to destroy, rewind to the early 1930s. The plains were blowing away in the Dust Bowl. Down south, a century of cotton had chewed the topsoil off whole counties, and every rain washed more red clay into the rivers. The Depression was on, and Roosevelt's people needed something that would stop the bleeding. The job landed on Hugh Hammond Bennett, first head of the Soil Conservation Service, and about as close to a national authority on dirt as the country had. Bennett wanted a single plant that could pull 4 jobs at once: sprint out of the ground, lock the soil down, put feed in front of cattle, and shrug off the hard-baked clay nobody else could farm. He believed he'd found his miracle in an import from East Asia, a climbing vine that made its American debut back in 1876 at the Philadelphia Centennial, where Japan had trained it up over its exhibit for shade. The vine was Kudzu. From 1935 on, the Soil Conservation Service handed farmers roughly $8 an acre, call it about $170 in today's dollars, to get it in the ground. The Civilian Conservation Corps opened nurseries across the region and cranked out seedlings by the tens of millions. Add it all up, and somewhere between 2 and 3 million acres went in under federal programs. For a while, people adored it. By 1947, an Atlanta radio man named Channing Cope had launched the Kudzu Club of America, 20,000 members strong. There were Kudzu queens crowned at county fairs, Kudzu festivals in Tennessee and Alabama, even Kudzu jelly recipes running in better homes and gardens. For one odd stretch of years, the government's soil saver was a genuine source of Southern pride. Then the mood turned. In 1953, without any announcement at all, the Soil Conservation Service quietly took Kudzu off its list of recommendations. By 1970, the USDA had reclassified it as a weed. In 1997, it made the federal noxious weed list outright. And from there, the same government that once subsidized the planting turned around and spent an estimated $500 million trying to wipe it out. Roundup, Crossbow, Torden, Triclopyr, spray program after spray program in every state from Texas to Virginia. It didn't work. The vine kept climbing. And the strange part is, the failure was baked in from the start. A sprayer can only kill what it can reach and what it can afford to reach again. Kudzu offered neither. That green wall you see from the road is a thin skin stretched over a buried machine. A root crown that can outweigh a grown man, drive 7 feet down into the clay, and hold years of stored sugar in reserve. Hit the leaves with everything the chemical companies ever bottled, and the crown simply waits, then shoves out a fresh flush of vine the following spring. To actually finish it, you'd have to spray the same square yard, correctly, for 3 or 4 seasons running, across millions of acres of ditch bank, rail line, and mountain shoulder no truck could ever get to. The math never closed. Washington was trying to bankrupt a plant that banks better than it does. Act 2, the number nobody had checked. But here's the twist. The legend of Kudzu grew a lot faster than Kudzu ever did. In 2009, a University of Maryland plant ecologist named Erwin Forseth got curious about something almost no one had trouble to verify. He decided to go count. For as long as anyone could remember, the official numbers were 7 million acres of kudzu nationwide, marching across the land at 150,000 acres a year. Those stats were in the papers, the policy memos, the school books, cited so relentlessly that nobody could point to where they'd come from. So Forseth teamed up with James Miller of the U.S. Forest Service and put them to the test. Satellite imagery. The Forest Service's long-running inventory plots, the same ones used to track timber every 5 years. Actual boots on the ground, checks all over the southeast. Their 2015 findings blindsided everyone. Kudzu's true footprint on U.S. forest land came out to about 227,000 acres, not 7 million. Its real rate of spread was around 2,500 acres a year, not 150,000. The figures behind 50 years of policy were roughly 30 times too big. How does a whole country get a number that wrong? 2 reasons. One is what you see through a windshield. Kudzu is unusually loud from a moving vehicle. A 50-foot green wall can shadow a highway for miles at a stretch. Roll down Interstate 75 from Macon to Chattanooga in July and it's beside you nearly the whole drive. Your brain does the rest. If it's on every shoulder, surely it's blanketing everything behind them too. The other is the plant's own biology. Kudzu is a sun addict. It goes wild on edges, roadsides, fence rows, old fields, power line clearings. What it cannot do is invade the middle of a healthy forest. Drop the closed canopy of a mature oak hickory stand over it, and it starves for light. Forseth and Miller's data spelled it out. Closed canopy, no kudzu. Open ground, kudzu. The famous wall is exactly that, a wall. Flat. It barely reaches back off the road. But shallow doesn't mean harmless. Across pasture, cut over timberland, and thousands of miles of rail line and highway shoulder, kudzu was still winning, and $500 million in chemicals had hardly slowed it. Then, one after another, 3 things showed up that could. Species 1, the goats. In 2003, a Maryland farmer named Brian Cash tried something so obvious, it's a wonder Washington never did. He turned goats loose on it. His outfit, Eco Goats, started with 40 head in Davidsonville. And everyone asks him the same thing. Why goats? Why not cattle or the sheep already out back? It comes down to who grew up eating what. Cattle are grassland animals from Eurasia, built to mow bulk grass. They'll pick at tender young kudzu, but the second it flowers, they quit. Too bitter, too tough. Sheep manage a bit more, but they're made to graze low and tight, not to reach up and strip vines dangling at chest height. Goats are the exception. Capra hircus was tamed in the mountains of the Middle East and Central Asia around 10,000 years ago, right alongside the wild cousins of kudzu itself. In a real sense, goat and vine have been sharing the same neighborhood for 10,000 years. They're old acquaintances. A goat eats kudzu from the top down, bloom first, then leaves, then the vine, and if you keep it on the patch long enough, the bark off the stems and the crown of the root. One grown goat clears 6 to 8 pounds of the stuff a day. 100 of them can flatten an acre in a day or two, but a single pass won't finish it. Down under the surface sits the root crown, kudzu's fuel tank, and on an old plant it can hit 400 pounds, plunge 7 feet down, and bank 2 or 3 years of starch. Cut the top and it shoves out fresh growth within weeks. The kill comes from rotation. 3 or 4 rounds of grazing over 18 to 24 months, each one bleeding a little more carbon out of that root, until the crown finally runs dry and the plant gives up. And the money is what turned it into a business. A full grazing cycle runs somewhere around $300 to $1,000 an acre. Herbicide over the same window runs $1,500 to $3,000 plus chemical residue and the cost of somebody walking it with a sprayer. A bush hog is cheaper per pass and kills nothing. The vine's back in 6 weeks. By 2005, Cash had landed his first paying job, clearing kudzu off public land for the city of Annapolis. By 2010, Lonnie Malberg's Goat Green, LLC, was running herds 1,000 strong out west. By 2020, There were more than 100 kudzu grazing operators across the South, with transportation departments in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas re-signing contracts year after year. The animal half these farms already had loafing in the back pasture turned out to be the sharpest weapon the country ever aimed at the vine the country planted. But a goat needs a fence, and you can't fence 1,000 miles of interstate shoulder. Something else had to cover the open ground. In 2009, something did, completely uninvited. Species 2, the stowaway bug. Before we get there, it helps to know why kudzu is such a nightmare to kill. In a southern summer, it can put on a foot of growth a day, the fastest climbing plant in the eastern US. Wherever a leaf node meets soil, it can root. One 30-foot runner might anchor in 5 spots, each becoming its own engine. An old patch isn't 100 plants, it's a single organism, a lattice of root crowns swapping carbon and water beneath the ground. Back home, in Japan, Korea, and eastern China, a whole cast of specialist bugs, fungi, and grazers keeps it honest. None of them tagged along in 1876. So, for 133 years on this continent, kudzu had no dedicated enemies at all. Then, in October 2009, one of them turned up on its own. Wayne Gardner, an entomologist at the University of Georgia, started fielding calls about a little brown insect swarming the kudzu around Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Bean-shaped, 4 to 6 millimeters, square-shouldered, hard-shelled. His lab pinned it fast. Megacopter cribraria, the kudzu bug, native to Japan, China, and Korea, and one of the vine's main tormentors in its homeland. It had almost certainly ridden in on air cargo. The tidy ring of first sighting counties around the airport was a dead giveaway. The kudzu bug pulls off what no homegrown American insect ever had. It drills into the vine and drinks the sap straight out. Pack enough of them onto a stand, and photosynthesis drops far enough that the plant loses mass over the season. University of Georgia studies between 2012 and 2018 measured cuts of about 33% per growing season where the bug was well established. In 5 years, it had reached 13 states, riding wind, riding traffic, going wherever the kudzu went, which was everywhere. For roughly 3 years, this looked like a gift, the tidiest case of accidental biological control anyone had seen. A specialist that flew in for free, went after the target, and needed no release program. Then the phones lit up in soybean country. Soybeans share a family with kudzu, the bean family, and Megacopter cribraria, wired by evolution to feed on bean family plants back in Asia, saw no reason to skip the American ones. The US soybean crop is worth around $40 billion a year, the country's second biggest field crop behind corn. Across 2013 and 2014, fields in Georgia and Alabama reported losses of 20 to 60% where the bug got thick. The remedy had become the bigger sickness. The fix for the fix, the wasp. So the USDA hunted down the kudzu bug's own nemesis and shipped it in from Asia, a pinhead-sized parasitoid wasp, Paratelenmus saccharalis. It lays eggs inside the kudzu bug's eggs. Its larva hatches first and devours the bug's egg from within. Releases started around 2017. The wasp settled in. Kudzu bug counts began sliding. By 2026, kudzu bug numbers are down 60 to 80% off their peak across most of the southeast. The wasp keeps the bug in check, and the bug, now at a gentler density, keeps working the kudzu without wrecking the beans. One uninvited arrival had spun into a 3-link chain: a vine meant to save the soil, a bug that showed up to police the vine, a wasp brought over to police the bug, each one slotting itself into the web of a country that never asked for any of it. Species 3, the quiet one. Now the part hardly anyone was watching. Kudzu can't live in deep shade. Close a canopy over it, whether oak hickory, pine hardwood, or even an established pine plantation, and there isn't enough light at ground level for it to feed itself. The root crown shrinks, the vine pulls back, and within a few years of the trees knitting shut overhead, the kudzu underneath is simply gone. Kudzu isn't a woodland plant, it's a plant of the gap. And across the South, the gaps had been closing on their own for decades. Where cotton went bust in the mid-1900s, the abandoned fields didn't stay open. They filled back in with trees. Loblolly pine seeded itself across millions of acres. Oak and hickory came behind it. By 2010, a huge share of the rural South that had been bare cotton dirt in 1940 was second-growth forest again. And on every acre of that comeback, Kudzu had been quietly retreating the whole time, nobody spraying it, just trees rising over it. In the deep woods, the forest was killing it, while the whole country stared at the roadside. In 2018, the U.S. Forest Service formally cut off dedicated Kudzu eradication funding on national forest land in the southeast. Their review board reached the same conclusion the inventory data had been whispering for years. Manage a forest for a closed canopy, and Kudzu clears out on its own. Pry the canopy back open, clear cuts, thinning, new roads, and it strolls right back in. The three together, so that's the whole picture. 3 killers, each assigned a different piece of the map. Goats settle it wherever a fence can go. The bug hits it out on the open ground the goats can't reach, and the forest canopy erases it deep in the woods where no one's even looking, just by growing shut over the top. No spray program ever landed all 3 blows at once, but 3 living things were already throwing them every day for nothing. And this isn't a one-off. The pattern is popping up all over the country. Chesapeake oysters rebuilding on fresh reef, blue catfish thinning invasive carp in the Illinois River, woodpeckers and a wasp closing the book on the emerald ash borer in Michigan, native predators grinding down spotted lanternfly in Pennsylvania. Nobody engineered any of it. Give the ecosystem enough time and enough elbow room, and it keeps solving problems we never wrote a plan for. And the ledger backs it up. USDA APHIS figures that in the states with the cleanest data, total Kudzu cover is down 18 to 25% from its high. No quarantine pulled that off. No budget line pulled it off. No chemical company ever bottled the herbicide that did it. What did it was a sheep farmer who bet on goats in 2003, a bug that hitched a ride on a cargo plane in 2009, and the forests we walked away from long enough to swallow the land we'd given up on. The economy that grew back. And here's the part that turns a cleanup story into something better. The goats aren't just clearing the kudzu, they're eating it. And then, in their turn, they're being eaten. The American goat meat market is worth around $250 million a year, and it's climbing about 4% annually, the fastest growing red meat in the country. Most of that demand comes from communities that never stopped raising goats. Caribbean families in Miami and New York, African and Latino households across the South, South Asian and Muslim markets from Detroit to Atlanta, Cabrito in Texas, halal slaughter near every major city. So an operator like Brian Cash gets paid twice. Once by the town that hires him to clear the vine, and again when the herd that ate it goes to market. Out in Wyoming, Lonnie Malberg does the same. In western North Carolina, a man named Tim Will runs a 500-head operation and sells straight to halal markets in Atlanta. And goats fattened on kudzu carry a quiet edge. They're chemical-free by default. Nobody sprayed the land they grazed. No herbicide, no pesticide, nothing to wash off. That meat moves at a small premium, $3 to $5 a pound on hot carcass weight, where conventional goat runs a little under. For a lot of these operators, it started as a side venture and became a living. Renting a herd doesn't take a chemical applicator's license, an expensive rig, or a degree. It takes goats, portable electric fence, and the patience to move animals every few days. That's put a real tool in the hands of small farmers who'd been squeezed out of nearly everything else, and it's why the business spread by word of mouth faster than any agency program ever pushed it. A county that once cut a check to a spray contractor now cuts it to a neighbor with a truck and 100 head. The vine itself has a smaller market, but a real one. Kudzu root starch, kuzu powder, is a traditional Japanese thickener and folk remedy that fetches around $20 a pound in specialty shops. The purple late summer flowers get cooked down into kudzu jelly, sold at farmers markets across Georgia and Alabama. In Korean kitchens, the young leaves go into namul. Kudzu will never be a commercial crop the way wild boar or invasive carp might. Too stringy, too common, too cheap to bother harvesting at scale, but around the edges, it feeds people. Follow the whole loop, and it closes on itself. Kudzu feeds the goats. The goats clear the kudzu. The cleared ground comes back as native grass or young forest. The goats become meat, and the meat lands on the tables of families whose grandparents, a world away, raised goats on land every bit as hard as these red clay hills. 3 million acres of bad federal advice has, over 90 years, quietly turned into a working pasture economy. The lesson. There's something buried in that arithmetic, and it's bigger than one weed. For most of the 20th century, the reflex was control, name the enemy, build the chemical, spray until it surrenders. Kudzu is what that reflex looks like when it loses. $500 million, 60 years, and a vine that never so much as flinched. What finally worked wasn't a bigger hammer. It was 3 things already living in the landscape, each doing a piece of the job for the price of nothing, on a timeline nobody could patent or take credit for. That's an uncomfortable answer for a country that likes its solutions engineered and its victories announced. Nobody held a press conference when a cargo plane dropped the kudzu bug at the Atlanta airport. Nobody cut a ribbon when a stand of loblolly pine finally grew tall enough to throw a hillside into shade. The winds were quiet, accidental, and free, which is exactly why they took so long to notice. We spent decades hunting for the answer in a spray tank while it was standing in the back pasture the whole time, chewing. It's coming up on 6 in the evening now, back in those red clay hills. Hank Mullins is sitting on the porch of the house his grandfather raised in 1932, looking west across the pasture where the wall once stood. There's a small green ledger in his lap, his grandfather's farm diary, open to April 14, 1937. He reads it low, mostly to himself. Planted 6 acres of kudzu today. Government man paid $48. He glances up. The wall is gone. In its place, the bare clay is easing back toward native Bermuda grass. The goats already shipped out 3 counties south on a Georgia DOT job along Route 53. He shuts the diary. Granddaddy planted what they told him to plant, he says, more to the floorboards than to anybody there. Government spent 60 years trying to take it back. Goats did it in 18 months. He stares out at the field as the light goes. Nature don't owe us a thing. We just had to remember what it can do and get our chemicals out of the way long enough to let it. For 90 years, the country built a problem that 90 years of herbicide couldn't unbuild. $500 million and the vine never blinked. In the end, it took a herd of goats, a bug nobody sent for, and the trees we finally quit cutting down. The wall came down. It just needed the right 3 things to eat it.